Welcome to Extraterrestrial Reality. Today we have a pretty decent show lined up, I believe. Later on, we're going to talk about an incident that happened about 20 years ago or so in Puerto Rico. This is a subscriber had contacted me via email and relayed her terrifying experience with alien creatures showing up in her bedroom one night. We're going to talk about that later on. And also, she had a lot of other weird things occur throughout her life, and now she's looking for answers. So we're going to talk about that later on. But first, I want to talk about this idea that some of these crafts that have been recovered by the United States government, they look like a certain size when you look at them from the outside, but when you walk in, they're like like a football stadium, incredible space. Somehow, it seems like these beings have the ability to build craft where they're able to warp space-time, obviously, right? Somehow, I mean, that's how we believe that's how we believe these craft get around. But also, they're able to create additional space where it shouldn't be somehow. I mean, can you imagine having this kind of technology? Can you imagine imagine how you could there would be more places for people to live if we were able to understand this technology. You could have the smallest house on the block. You would think from the outside looking at it, it only has one or two rooms maybe, but when you go into it, it could be as big as a football stadium. These are some of the strange stories that we hear from whistleblowers over the years. Most recently, back in 2023, Danny Sheehan, who represents different whistleblowers, including David Grush, he talked about a whistleblower who was going to be meeting with a Senate committee back at that time, who actually went into a craft that from the outside it was only 30 feet in diameter, but when you went inside it was like a football stadium. And here was a direct quote. Actually, this is a quote from an article from the Daily Mail from 2 years ago. This is what Sheehan said. He said they tried to hook a bulldozer to it to pull it out. So basically what was going on here, let's just stop there for a second. This thing was found buried in the sand somewhere. It doesn't say what location it was or where, it doesn't say the year where this happened. But anyway, they tried to hook a bulldozer to it to pull it out. And it pulled out a shape like a pie slice, almost like it was part of the way it was constructed. When it came loose a couple feet, they stopped immediately. They didn't want to destroy the integrity of the machine. Okay, so basically what happened here is that he's saying that that they're going to try to pull it out with a bulldozer, but only one section of the craft start coming out, not the whole thing, so they didn't want to break it. It doesn't really say here how they eventually ended up getting the whole craft out. I'm assuming they had to dig it out. But anyway, they stopped doing it. They stopped trying to pull it like that because they didn't want to destroy the machine. And then they had a guy go into it. And it says, he got in there and it was as big as a football stadium. It was freaking him out and started making him feel nauseous. He was so disoriented because it was so gigantic in size. It was the size of a football stadium, while the outside was only about 30 feet in diameter. He staggered back out, and after being in there a couple of minutes and outside, it was 4 hours later. There was all kinds of time distortion and space distortion. So he didn't say back then, what about the people that were outside when this guy went in? Like, what did it seem like he just vanished for a little bit, or because it was 4 hours later when he came back out? Like, that's not explained here. But this story here is very similar to a different story that Leonard Stringfield, the late Leonard Stringfield, he was a UFO investigator who actually is responsible for this book right here I have in my hands. Is called UFO Crash Retrievals, the Complete Investigation Status Reports 1 through 7. Basically, he wrote these status reports on different people he was talking with who would relay stories to him about recovered alien craft, recovered alien bodies. And he did this over the course of many years, from 1978 until 1994, which is the year that he died. He would come out with these reports where he would have all this information, basically detailing his discussions with many different people, insiders, people who had who encountered these craft, people who were part of crash retrievals, part of recovering alien bodies, people who were part of doing autopsies on aliens. It was all these different. This is one of the best. I'll tell you what, if you're really interested in this subject and you're really interested in crash retrievals, this right here is a must-have. It's a must. It's an expensive book, but I talked about this book before. It's definitely what you want. Definitely something you want inside your library. I can tell you that. But anyway, he learned this. This was from John Lear. At the time, John Lear was the MUFON state director for Nevada, and he was at the time back in the late 1980s. John Lear was appearing in different TV shows and radio shows talking about, crash retrievals, things that he's learned from different insiders about this program to recover crashed UFOs and try to reverse engineer them. And some guy was listening to him. Now the pseudonym they use for this guy is Mike. It says here on page 161, it says, listening was Mike, his real name withheld on request, who surfaced in September 1988 to tell Lear his first-hand story. Admittedly troubled by his experience, Mike explained that in 1973 he had been an Air Force photographer stationed in Hawaii following duty in Vietnam. His prime duty there was processing gun camera film. One day he said he was notified that his security clearance had been upgraded, and several weeks later he and another photographer in his unit were flown for a temporary duty assignment to Norton Air Force Base in California. Lear's letter to me, November 21st, 1988, recounting briefly his interview with Mike, is paraphrased as follows. On landing at Norton, Mike and companion were taken by Air Force vehicle with windows blacked out on a 2-hour drive. During the drive, Mike was told by the driver, "So you guys are going to photograph the UFO, eh?" The vehicle came to a halt on a platform, which was then lowered into a large underground installation. Escorted to a briefing room where they were told that they were to photograph a flying saucer and the autopsy of 3 dead aliens. Ordered to disrobe, they were issued white smocks and combat boots for security purposes. Mike was then escorted into the installation where he saw a disc-shaped craft about 30 feet in diameter contained in a heavy net suspended from a large crane. Mike was boosted into the opening of the disc. There were no stairs or ramp, and he proceeded to crawl inside. He was shocked, he said, to find that the inside looked to be about 10 times the size of the outside. He commented, "I could have thrown a football as hard as I could and not hit the other side." Disoriented, Mike poked his head back outside to check the size, which appeared to be about 30 feet in diameter as before. Once inside, he met 2 persons similarly clothed in white smocks who showed him what they wanted photographed. He shot many photos of control panels and various other fixtures, and later was asked to photograph the exterior from different angles and distances. And then it talks about he was later taken to a room where there were 3 dead aliens. They were dressed in blue flight suits. And then he took pictures of them while they were still dressed, and then they undressed them, and they started doing an autopsy on one of them. And he noticed that the blood was green, or the fluid that was coming out of it was green. And eventually he got too sick. He couldn't continue with taking the pictures, and then he had to get the other guy, his buddy, to finish up taking the photographs because he was getting ill during the autopsy. So there's 2 different instances, and they are 2 different. They're most certainly sound like 2 different instances. One of them, the one that Danny Sheehan was talking about a couple years ago, that one obviously that was at the crash site. I mean, they're talking about a crash site. They're trying to get the thing out of there. So I don't know if that's the same instance. That's 1973 incident. Is it the same thing or not? Who knows? But both of these stories are very similar because in the Danny Sheehan story, basically it was very large inside this craft. Look from the outside, it only looked like it was 30 feet in diameter, but the inside was as big as a football field. And then this other story from Leonard Stringfield via John Lear, the same kind of situation, except I mean, the only difference is in the Danny Sheehan account, the person who went into the craft became nauseous while inside the craft, and when he came out, although it felt to him he was only in there for a couple of minutes, when he came outside, 4 hours had passed by somehow. That's not the story with the one from Leonard Stringfield. That was something different. But they do seem to basically be the same kind of situation where they're talking about somehow these craft, they look smallish, 30 feet in diameter. I mean, that's, not that big, right? It's not football stadium sized big, right? You wouldn't think you're going to walk into something and it's going to be like, wow, it's going to be as big as a football stadium. Very strange that they're able to manipulate space and time this way. And this is one of the reasons you have to think that the governments of the world are trying to reverse engineer this kind of stuff. They're trying to figure out how these things tick. Could you imagine having that ability? I mean, say you were able to duplicate one of these craft, not only duplicate the technology that makes the craft move around in the ways that they're able to move around, but also duplicate the ability to create this extra space inside these vehicles. Could you imagine what that would mean? I mean, you'd be able to, if you were able to duplicate a 30-inch or 30-foot diameter flying saucer that has this football field size space inside of it, you'd probably be able to fit thousands and thousands of troops in there. Say you wanted to sneak in an army to some country to help fight some war, and you don't want the enemy to know that you're doing it. Well, that would be a way to do that, right? If you could figure out how that technology works, how you're able to reproduce that effect, that ability to do this kind of thing, that would be so beneficial to the militaries, any military of the world, because then this was like, nobody could stop you. I mean, nobody would be able to ever figure out where your troops are coming from. You could sneak them in. I mean, and only a little 30-foot diameter craft, you'd be able to fit in who knows how many tens of thousands of troops. Possibly. I mean, who knows? If it's as bigger than the football field, like some of these witnesses have said, then that'd be something you'd be able to do. I mean, it's incredible as it sounds, but that's one of the things you'd have to think. One of the reasons why they want to keep this a secret. That right there, that aspect of it right there, you'd want to figure that out before somebody else figures it out, because whoever figures that out first is going to have a big time advantage over everybody else on this planet. So that's one of the reasons for this cover-up, I would have to imagine. And in addition to the just, trying to recreate the craft, the abilities that they have to move around, you'd want to be able to do that too. But in addition, could you imagine having that ability to be able to fit basically all these people, like thousands of military personnel inside of a small little craft, and sneak it into some country which you're about to go to war with or something? They wouldn't be able to stop you. Could you imagine if we would have had something like that when we stormed the beaches of Normandy, back in 1944? Maybe there wouldn't have been as many casualties, perhaps. I mean, the Nazis would never have figured out where we were coming. They wouldn't have seen it. They wouldn't have known. They wouldn't have been able to stop it. We would have completely crushed them probably within a week with that kind of technology. So that's why it's important, I think, from the military's viewpoint, to keep this a secret, because they want to figure this kind of stuff out before anybody else does. That would be, I mean, it's almost like, you see movies about miniaturization. It reminds me of that 1960s movie, 1966, I think it was, Fantastic Voyage, where in that movie they developed, the government came up with this new technology to miniaturize people, like so you can't even see them because they're microscopic. And what they did, but in that movie, they were trying to save the life of this scientist, and so what they did, they put this crew of scientists together in the submarine. They shrunk the submarine down to microscopic size, and then injected it into the scientist. And they needed to traverse all the way to where the scientist's brain was, so they could use a laser beam to take the pressure off because he was shot, and they needed to remove some damaged tissue there, and that would save his life. But it's similar. I mean, if you could miniaturize people, right, into microscopic size, you could put them into a bottle or a cup and go into another country, and then when they start growing again, there could be tens of thousands of people there. This, in a way, this technology that these creatures seem to have is similar in that vein, because you'd be able to have all this additional space, right, for people to fit in. Imagine what something like that would look like a 30-foot diameter flying saucer, and all of a sudden it lands somewhere, covertly, right, in some enemy country, and then the door opens up, and you see coming out of this small craft, like thousands and thousands of military personnel. Tanks and all. I mean, who knows what you'd be able to... I mean, if you have that ability, who knows what the potentials are there? I mean, it'd be incredible. The possibilities are endless, I would have to imagine. But I think it would also help with, maybe just for the regular person. You like, I'm in this room right now. I'm in this office. Could you imagine from the outside? I mean, if you were to look, if you were to strip the house away from where I'm on a second floor office right here, right? If you were to strip this house away and just see the four walls of this room, it would be fairly small. But if you had this ability that these beings have, who knows? You could make it like a palace in here. You'd be able to fit hundreds or thousands of people in here. As crazy as that sounds, but that seems to be the ability that these beings have. Now, I did do a little of Now, I did do a little research here online about this. I was asking AI some questions about it, and I asked them, like, how is this possible? Here's what it says: the bigger on the inside phenomenon. The idea that something can be larger on the inside than the outside sounds like science fiction popularized by Doctor Who's TARDIS, but here are the theoretical concepts that people invoke to explain it. Yeah. How do you explain it? Okay, one, spatial manipulation / warping of space-time. General relativity allows for the warping of space-time. If an advanced technology could manipulate spatial dimensions, it might be possible to fold space internally, creating more volume inside than appears externally. This might involve non-Euclidean geometry or even artificially created wormholes that create a pocket of space disconnected from our three-dimensional framework. And then number two, it says here, dimensional engineering. The idea that the craft is somehow accessing higher spatial dimensions, like a fourth or fifth spatial dimension, could allow for objects to have properties that defy our normal perception of volume. Think of a 3D cube intersecting a 2D plane. The beings in 2D would see just a square, unaware of the cube's full structure. Similarly, we may only perceive a portion of a multidimensional object. Number three, holographic interior / virtual expansion. Another speculative theory suggests the inside could involve projected or simulated environments, much like a holographic space, creating the illusion or functional reality of a larger interior without actually expanding physical dimensions. This might involve energy-based constructions rather than solid materials. Now, I just want to stop there for a second. I don't think that what was being described here had anything to do with holographs or virtual reality expansion. No, I don't think that. Apparently, it was as big as a football field inside these things. And also, in addition to the difference in the spatial differences, there was obviously something going on with time as well. Then it says here, the origin of the claim. While no official documentation supports this, reports like these come from ATIP insiders, alleged retrieval program whistleblowers, unofficial sources claiming access to legacy UFO crash retrieval programs from mid to late 20th century. And then it summarizes it thusly. It says, yes, the claim exists and is circulating in modern UFO narratives. If true, it would suggest that technology far beyond human capabilities, obviously, potential use of extra-dimensional physics or exotic energy manipulation, a need to rethink assumptions about space, volume, and material reality. And I actually asked it another question too. I said, I was curious about people who went in the craft. They became nauseous, and when they exited, after only a few minutes, hours went by. 4 hours went by in the one case related by Danny Sheehan, and I wanted to know, what does that mean? And AI tells me that part of the story, the person entering the craft, feeling nauseous, exiting after what felt like a few minutes, and discovering that 4 hours had passed, is highly significant and suggests several advanced and exotic phenomena. Here's a breakdown of what it could mean, assuming the account is accurate. Number one, time dilation or temporal distortion. The explanation for this is the most direct implication. The craft may be operating in a space where time flows differently, either due to gravitational time dilation, as described in Einstein's general relativity, or engineered temporal environments where time is artificially manipulated. The possible causes of this is the craft may generate strong gravitational or inertial fields. It could be situated in a warped region of space-time, like a localized pocket dimension or a time bubble. And here's an analogy. It says astronauts near a black hole in Interstellar experience minutes that equal years on Earth. A similar principle could be at work on a smaller scale. Number two, perceptual or cognitive effects. The explanation for this: time loss could also result from neurological effects caused by being in close proximity to exotic technology. The nausea suggests the environment was biologically incompatible or disorienting. The possibilities: electromagnetic, gravitational, or quantum fields inside the craft affect human perception or brain function. Memory or consciousness may become desynchronized from external reality, a form of missing time often reported in alien abduction cases, which might be due to altered states of consciousness. And then number three here, nonlinear time environment. The explanation: the interior of the craft might not operate under linear time as we understand it. Time inside could be folded, looped, or compressed. What felt like minutes subjectively may have taken hours in external reality. It suggests that the craft's internal space may be governed by an entirely different physical framework, perhaps not bound by conventional 3D space and 1D time. Then number 4 here is the biological response to non-human technology. The nausea could also indicate a biological reaction to high levels of radiation, electromagnetic energy, or unknown particle emissions, a disruption of inner ear equilibrium due to gravitational anomalies, a biochemical incompatibility with the craft's atmosphere, pressure, or field environment. The fact that he became ill and disoriented adds credibility to the idea that the experience wasn't just psychological, but physically overwhelming. It's all very interesting, and it's hard to wrap your mind around how this might operate, and we really don't know how it operates. Maybe the people who are studying this behind the scenes have a better idea than we humans do, but apparently this is something else that these crafts, some of these craft that they've recovered, exhibit. This ability, or whatever, I don't know how, if you call it an ability, technology, how, whatever, this ability to create additional space where it shouldn't be somehow. It sounds incredible, but apparently that's how advanced these beings are. They figured this out somehow. They were able to, fit a lot more into smaller spaces. They look small to us, but they're really not. It's amazing, but it makes you realize it's another reason why this is such that why they want to keep this a secret. That's what this is. It's another reason for that. Okay, moving on. I want to talk about this email message I received this week, and this was from someone who wants to go by a pseudonym, and the pseudonym is Annalisis. This is a person from originally from Puerto Rico, and she's looking for answers to some of the concerns she has about an experience that happened to her somewhere in the early 2000s, apparently. And here's what she wrote to me. I'm going to share. I got permission to share this message with you guys, and then we'll talk about it as we go through. It says here, I wanted to share a little bit about where I come from and who I am so you can understand why I feel the way I do. I was born on the beautiful island of Puerto Rico and raised in a small town named Comerio. One so tiny that we still don't have stoplights. Back in those days, even some Puerto Ricans didn't know we existed. I'm now 45 years old and work as a teacher in the States. I've been working here for over 20 years now. Since childhood, I've encountered numerous paranormal experiences, particularly after moving from Bayamon, Puerto Rico, the town where I spent the first 3.5 years of my life. When I was almost 4, we relocated to Comerio, and that's where my paranormal journey began. As a result of living in that house, countless things unfolded that I still wonder about today. One of the most terrifying moments I endured, which I desperately seek an explanation for, I shared with my niece, who now lives in Florida. To paint a clearer picture of what transpired, I need to explain a bit more. I'm the youngest of 5 children, and many of my nieces and nephews are nearly my age. One of my oldest brothers has a daughter who we will call Mary for now. When she was 16, she fell in love, became pregnant, and as you can imagine, it was a monumental event at that time. Back then, there were still a lot of taboos. My brother and sister-in-law struggled to support her, so they sent her to live with my mother in Puerto Rico until she delivered the baby. I was already married by then, having wed at just 19. I lived upstairs in a home constructed atop my mother's house. Years earlier, my oldest brother had lived there, but after Hurricane George decimated the place, we used the funds to rebuild. I ended up living there myself and started a family. Each morning, my husband at the time, we are divorced now, and I would wake up and I'd hurry downstairs to check on my niece. I was absolutely thrilled to have her living with my mom, given that all my siblings were adults with families of their own. To me, she felt more like a friend, and we shared a beautiful bond. But one night, something horrifying happened while my husband and I slept, something that filled me with intense fear. I awoke, paralyzed, unable to understand why I was feeling such terror. I reached out to touch the lamp beside me, only to discover I couldn't move, not even one finger. I know you've heard of sleep paralysis and many people describing very similar experiences, but I assure you, I was awake. My eyes were wide open, and I remember every detail of how the room looked that night. In that chilling moment, I looked down and saw the blanket covering my body. I could feel my belly rising and falling as I breathed in panic, desperately wishing I could move even a finger. What was happening to me? I couldn't understand why I was stuck, able only to move my eyes. I tried to scream a name, my husband's, my mother's, anyone who could help me, but no sound escaped my lips. Yet outside our closed windows, light glowed brightly, illuminating what seemed like the moon itself. It was maddening. Something was not right. I moved my eyes to my right, and there was my husband sleeping like a baby, not realizing what his wife was going through at the moment. I yelled his name from the top of my lungs, but he could not hear me. I felt desperate. Then the most horrific thing of all happened. As I moved my eyes to my left, I saw beside me a being many referred to as a gray alien, along with a figure cloaked in darkness that seemed to float rather than stand. My fear morphed into a dreadful ache, and tears streamed down my cheeks as I cried out for help with more intensity. I screamed, called names, I yelled, but nobody seemed to hear me. It wasn't until I called the name of God that they suddenly vanished, and at that exact moment my husband jolted awake, turned on the lamp, and asked me what was wrong. As I recounted my frantic experience, he brushed it off as a dream and went back to sleep, leaving me terrified and unable to close my eyes. There was no way I could close my eyes any longer. I remained awake until I knew my parents were up the next morning. As dawn broke, my desire to escape that house strengthened. I tiptoed downstairs, trying not to wake my husband so I could go check on my niece like I did every morning. I wanted to feel that everything was back to normal and my husband was right. It was just a dream. To my relief, everything seemed normal as my mom greeted me with coffee. My dad gave me a big hug and I walked down the long hallway into the last bedroom where my niece was residing at the time. I entered her room and asked her how she was feeling and how was the belly feeling that morning, as lately her pregnancy was causing her some discomfort. I noticed she was sitting on her bed, forehead resting in her palm, and asked me to close the door while checking for anyone outside. When I did so and sat beside her, she began to tell me that she needed help figuring something out. I immediately thought it had something to do with her boyfriend, but to my surprise, it was something totally different. She began saying something like, "I need to tell you something, but I don't think you're going to believe me." I just looked at her and said, "Try me." At that moment, I just thought, after what happened to me last night, I can believe pretty much anything. She began to tell me these words. "I was sleeping last night when I suddenly woke up in fear. I immediately noticed I could not move anything but my eyes. When I looked to my left, there were two beings standing by me. One was a gray alien and the other one a cloaked figure. Jim, my heart raced and my jaw dropped. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She looked at me in disappointment and said, "I knew you were not going to believe me." I was speechless. How could this be? I immediately assured her that it was the contrary. I did believe her, and I told her I had the same experience. She leaped from her bed, ecstatic that she wasn't alone in this madness. We talked about this all day, but told each other not to tell anybody because who would believe us, right? Eventually, our connection faded as the years went by. I moved to the United States, she returned to New York, and our paths drifted apart. After my divorce, I found a wonderful man in the United States, and I have been living with him since then. One time I confessed to him what had happened to me in Puerto Rico. He looked at me as if I was crazy. Honestly, I know he did not believe me, but I left it alone. And then it goes on to say that this all changed in 2023 when sadly my mother passed away unexpectedly. I will never forget the date, August 26, 2023, probably the worst day of my life. All the family gathered in Comerio, Puerto Rico for one final farewell. The day we buried my mother, we all met at her house to chat and remember beautiful memories we shared together. Even though it was a sad moment, I was so happy to be able to connect with my family once again after so many years of not seeing many of them. As we are all having different conversations, I suddenly see my niece get up from the couch and approach me quickly as she asks, loud and in front of the entire family, if I remember the time she and I saw an alien and a black figure on the same night. Jim, so much time have passed that I had convinced myself that this had been just a dream and nothing else. But when I heard those words come out of my niece's mouth, I was stunned. It felt like the universe had awakened dormant secrets. The dreamlike haze lifted, and I realized alongside her that what had happened to me years ago was indeed real. My husband looked at me in disbelief. I think for the first time he finally believed me. He believed that what I had told him many years ago was true. I was not making stuff up. I was so thankful to my niece at that moment. Now I've determined to uncover the truth of that night and why it happened. Together with my niece, I've been trying to reach out for help to explore the depths of that experience. Let me just stop there for a second. I did, in contact with Annalisa's. I suggested that she, get hypnotized, and that would be one way to figure it out. If there might be some more to this that could be remembered under hypnosis. I don't know what else to say. I mean, here's the thing. This is a real phenomenon, and if this happened to you, then it happened to you. And obviously there's going to be a lot of people out there who don't believe you, but you know it's true, right? You know, a lot of people know it's true. I know this kind of stuff happens. It happened to me. I know there was a creature in my room when I was a kid. So this kind of thing does happen. So don't worry about what anybody else thinks. If you want to get to the bottom of this, I think that, you have to see... I would talk to a psychiatrist who would be willing to hypnotize you to try to recover memories, lost memories, hidden memories. That's what I would do. I would probably take it to that. That's where I would take it. I would take it to that level. If you want to get answers, that's the way to do it. Now, here's how I feel. Like people ask me, why don't you get hypnotized? Because there's probably stuff you don't remember, and I'm sure that there is. I'm already convinced. I was awake. I know. I don't need it. I already know it's real. I have other questions with this. I don't know if I want to remember something that's gonna terrify me. I don't want to feel like I'm 9 years old again and scared out of my mind because there's some kind of what I think is a demon in the room. I don't know if I want to relive that again. That was extremely terrifying. I can't even begin to tell you. And so I understand how she feels, right? I understand how a lot of people feel when these kinds of things happen. It's absolutely terrifying. It's totally unexpected. It just happens out of the clear blue sky, and there it is. There's something there, and your whole world is shattered, and you're wondering what in the hell is going on in this weird life. Anyway, continuing with this story here, she says, there's so much strangeness surrounding it all, and there is so much more that has happened to me that if I write it down in this email, it will be 500 pages. It will be a 500-page long deal. But I've had experiences where, like, for example, my mom, my niece, and I heard a baby crying in the toilet for a week after I had a lost pregnancy. Super weird and unexplainable stuff. One time also, I was standing next to my bed one night looking at my body while I was sleeping, and I was accompanied by a being that took me downstairs to my mom's house where I saw my mom and dad watching a boxing match, and this being asked me to look through the window, and I looked, and something so weird. This being asked me to interpret it, and then I went back to my body. When I was back in my body, I immediately ran downstairs hyperventilating, and to my disbelief, right in front of my eyes, my parents were doing exactly what I saw them doing when I was out of my body. They were watching a boxing match. How could I have possibly seen that before I saw it? I mean, so many things that happened to me, things I would like to share, things that I would like to find out why they happened to me. What's the purpose? And by the way, this thing I saw that the being showed me and asked me to interpret why I saw what I saw were moons in the sky. I can't remember the exact amount. I want to say it was 12 moons, but I truly don't remember, and they were all in a circle, and then after that they positioned themselves into triangle shapes, and then there was a fire and the screaming and the crying, and I could hear guns and bombs. It was terrifying, and I asked this being, what is this? And it said interpreta, Spanish for interpret it. And as soon as it said those words, I fell back into my body. Let's stop right there. What does that mean? What was the being trying to tell her? Interpret it. She was hearing guns, bombs. She saw what looked like 12 moons, and then they changed themselves into triangle shapes. What was the message that the being was trying to convey? Anyway, she fell back into her body. This happened over 2 decades ago, Jim, and as of today, I don't even know what it means. Maybe this is the time now to uncover the secret. Maybe somebody can help me. I know I sound crazy. Even listening to myself, I feel I sound crazy. But I guarantee you 100% I'm not making things up. I am not lying. I'm telling you the truth. Also, these orbs that people see now, as soon as I started hearing on TV that people are seeing orbs, I got so excited because when I was 17 years old, Jim, I saw an orb and it was so real and so perfect and so luminous and alive and so mysterious. It was so close to me. I can't even believe that people are seeing these things now. You know, Jim, I've gone through so much, it's ridiculous, and I want to know. I am so curious to know, but I am also scared. I don't want people to ridicule me. I don't want people to look at me like I'm crazy, you know. I deal with the public, and I'm afraid of what people are going to think of me, and that's why, for now, I'd rather stay anonymous, but I do give you permission to share this in your podcast, because this is real, and these are experiences that I have shared with other people. It is not about some person living in the jungle seeing crazy things, and no, I have never done drugs or anything like that. What I am testifying is real, and I have at least one witness who is willing to come forward as well. So I thought that was a very, very intriguing story, and these beings relayed a message. They put a message. They showed her bombs. She heard noises, all kinds of stuff. She saw all 12 moons in the sky, moons that then transformed into triangles. What's that all about? What were they trying to convey? This sounds similar in a way, actually, to the telepathic messages that the alien creatures had put into the minds of those kids at in the Ariel school incident that were part of that. That's what it sounds like to me. Of course, if you haven't heard that story, I know a lot of you know what I'm talking. Most of you, I'm sure, know what I'm talking about. In 1994, there were kids at this school in Zimbabwe, Ariel school. They were out on their recess, and all the teachers were inside the building having a teachers conference, and craft landed, alien beings exited. Over 60 kids witnessed it. A handful of the kids were given telepathic messages. They were told that technology could be dangerous, and they were shown scenes of destruction. Is something similar going on here in this message? Okay, let's go through the message again. It says, I can't remember the exact amount. I want to say it was 12 moons. So it was showing her 12 moons. This being was showing her 12 moons during this out-of-body experience. But I truly don't remember, and they were all in a circle. And then after they positioned themselves into triangle shapes. And then there was fire and the screaming and the crying, and I could hear guns and bombs. So it sounds like there's some disaster ongoing, people killing each other. I mean, bombs going off. What is it all about? Interpret it. What was going on? And she doesn't know what to think of it. And she's asking now. She wants answers to the questions. I guess, in 2023, during the funeral of her mother, after the funeral was over and they had a family gathering, and her niece brought these memories back. She forgot about it for a long time. It was in the back of her mind. She wasn't thinking about it anymore. But then it's all come back now. Now her and her niece want to get answers. They want to understand why was there a gray and some sort of a shadow being appearing before them years earlier, back in the early 2000s. And then during a different event, in a different incident, she had this out of body experience where a being was trying to showed her some things and then asked her to interpret it. I don't know. I think it's really weird. And so, if anyone out there has any ideas, please provide them in the comments on both Spotify and on YouTube. It would be very much appreciated. Anyway, I'm going to wrap it up here. I want to say thank you all for joining me today. Until next time.